Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, let me thank the leadership of Assam for inviting this galaxy of speakers from 30 different countries to talk about the concept of justice. I have submitted my paper to the Congress, but after listening to excellent presentation of Dr. Sheila Yusuf of Malaysia, and particularly after watching the video on Palestine, I have changed my mind. I am not going to read the paper. Dr. Sheila Yusuf, she said, justice should not be defined on juridical and political basis. It must be defined on moral and ethical basis. Dear brothers and sisters, today the concept of justice has become an illusion. It has become a delusion. It has become the nightmare for the Muslims all over the world. Today we are living in a world when everybody is seeking justice, but at a time which is full of prejudice, which is full of discrimination, which is full of inequality, which is full of hypocrisy and dishonesty. Dear brothers and sisters, it is unfortunate, but it is true that today the world powers have lost their moral compass. Today the world powers have lost their ethical principles. Today the world powers have lost their democratic values. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not what I am talking about. Just read the New York Times, October 23rd, 2023, New York Times. New York Times wrote, the developing countries see the actions of the West full of double standards in Gaza and in Ukraine. A German scholar, Hannah Notte, she wrote, there is a perception that the West cares more about the suffering of the people of Ukraine than the suffering of the people of Gaza, Sudan, and Syria. Dr. Carl Bildt. Ladies and gentlemen, do you know who is Carl Bildt? He was the Prime Minister of Sweden, a European Prime Minister. He said, most of the world perceives double standards in the foreign policy of the West in two wars in Gaza and in Ukraine. We are being told that world powers follow their national interest. They do not frame their foreign policy in accordance to the ethical values and moral principles. Ladies and gentlemen, that is true. The world powers, they follow their national interest. But you tell me, ladies and gentlemen, what do they do when they are confronting an extremity of a situation like Ukraine? You know what do? They speak the language of morality. When America was facing the crucial situation in Ukraine, United States of America, what did our president say, President Biden? President Biden said on October 12, 2022, just more than a year ago, President Biden, when he was seeing the suffering in Ukraine, He said, we cannot tolerate the illegal attempts of annexation, and we cannot tolerate the theft of a foreign land by force. President Biden said, we will stand by the international law and we will stand by the United Nations Charter. Our ambassador to the United Nations, Ambassador Linda Greenfield, she said at the Security Council, the American ambassador to the United Nations, she said Russia is undermining the UN Charter. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to ask President Biden, do you really believe that Israel is defending the UN Charter? That Israel is defending the international law in Gaza? Do you truly believe that Narendra Modi is protecting the international law and UN Charter in Kashmir? Ladies and gentlemen, we know there's a suffering on the streets of Ukraine. The world powers feel the pain and suffering of the people of Ukraine. So do the Muslims all over the world. But the question arises, ladies and gentlemen, will there be a time when these world powers are going to feel the pain and suffering on the streets of Gaza, on the streets of Myanmar, on the streets of Kashmir? There is definitely pain on the streets of Ukraine. The world powers, they invoke Fourth Geneva Convention. You know why? Because they came to the conclusion that crimes against humanity are being committed in Ukraine. We endorse that. But the only question arises, when will the world powers invoke Fourth Geneva Convention in Gaza? When, according to the United Nations, crimes against humanity are being committed there. When would the world powers invoke Fourth Geneva Convention in Kashmir? When, according to the multiple NGOs, United Nations Special Rapporteurs, crimes against humanity are being committed in Kashmir. You may be wondering, yes, we just saw the video. What is happening in Gaza? But who is this gentleman talking about the crimes against humanity being committed by India? Is it India the land of Gandhi? Is it India the largest democracy? Ladies and gentlemen, don't listen to me. Just listen to the Dr. Gregory Stanton, the chairman of Genocide Watch. He testified before the United States Congress in January of 2022. And he told them that 30 years ago in 1993, I warned the world powers, there is going to be a genocide in Rwanda. You close your eyes. You did not heed to my warning. And the genocide took place in Rwanda. Dr. Gregory Stanton warned the United States Congress and the Biden administration, Kashmir is at the brink of genocide. The New York-based Committee to Protect Journalists, they wrote Kashmir, the news media in Kashmir is at the brink of extinction. The New York Times, on August 10, 2019, New York Times wrote, Kashmir has become the hell for the people of Kashmir. Huffington Post, August 5, 2019, Huffington Post. The Indian democracy is dying in silence in Kashmir. One of the internationally known leading human rights activists of India, Arundhati Roy, she said the 900,000, I am not speaking, Arundhati Roy, an Indian, saying the 900,000 Indian army has made Kashmir the largest army concentration anywhere in the world. President Biden, he must have the fullest form of information about what is going on in any part of the world, particularly in Gaza and Kashmir. He said, I am proud to say the democracies of the world have become stronger, not weaker. And the official position of America is India is the largest democracy. But I am surprised that President Biden does not read New York Times. New York Times, which is just 200 miles away from Washington. What did New York Times write? New York Times wrote, Modi's India is where global democracy dies. Ladies and gentlemen, the situation of judiciary in Kashmir is appalling. Because of the shortage of time, I will give you just one example. In Kashmir, you can say anything you want to say. You can write anything you want to write. But ladies and gentlemen, you cannot write what Indian army is doing in Kashmir. You cannot write that. If you do, you will be picked up and thrown thousands of miles away in the jails of India. But that's not it. To be in the jail is not it. You are going to be lodged under a draconian law, which is UFA, Unlawful Activity Prevention Act. Anybody lodged under this act can be called a terrorist. A prime example is Ghulam Parvez. He's a Kashmiri. He was lodged 2 years ago under UFA because he's a terrorist. Is he a terrorist? I am saying no, but you cannot believe me. I am going to quote Mary Lawler, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defender, Mary Lawler. She wrote, Ghulam Parvez is not a terrorist, he is a human rights defender, unquote. Time magazine wrote Ghulam Parvez is one of the 100 most influential personalities of the world. You have heard the name of President John F. Kennedy. His niece, Carrie Kennedy, she gave one of the most prestigious human rights award to Ghulam Parvez in 2005 in New York, Carrie Kennedy. With that, she gave him an honorarium of $50,000. $50,000 does not mean much in America. It may not mean much in Turkey. Dear brothers and sisters, $50,000 is an unimaginable amount in Kashmir. What did Ghulam Parvez do, ladies and gentlemen? When he landed in Kashmir, he gave every single penny to an NGO, Jammu and Kashmir Coalition for Civil Society. What was the crime of Ghulam Parvez? This his crime, ladies and gentlemen. This is the documentation, 550-page documentation, the torture of Indian army in Kashmir. 550-page. He submitted himself to the United Nations when he was here. He submitted himself in the United Nations in Geneva. You know who wrote the foreword of this book? None other than United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture, Dr. Juan Mendes. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what needs to be done? I will quote only one person, an intellectual, a diplomat, and a politician. He's not from Turkey. He's not from Kashmir. He's not a Muslim. He's not from Pakistan. Then who is this gentleman? He is an intellectual because he is a Harvard graduate, Harvard University, United States. He's a graduate of Harvard University. Why he is diplomat? Because he was the Federal Minister of India for Finance and Interior. So he is not a man on the street. The Federal Minister of India of Finance and Interior. What did he say? His name is P. Chidambaram. P. Chidambaram said, and I endorse that. I hope everybody who is listening this presentation, they will endorse that. He said, India, if you are truly a democracy, then giving the people of Kashmir right to self-determination is the right thing to do. Then he also said, India, if you want the people of Kashmir to love India, then give them the right to self-determination. So, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, when people of Kashmir are demanding the right to self-determination, it was agreed upon by India and Pakistan, by the United Nations, as early as 1948. Resolution number 43 of 1948. Resolution number 46 of 1948. Resolution number 48 of 1948 on the issue of Palestine. Resolution number 47 of 1948, everything happened in 1948 and April of 1948 on the issue of Kashmir. So we call upon the United Nations. You have given this promise to the people of Palestine. You have given this promise to the people of Kashmir. They are not demanding the moon. They are demanding the implementation of the United Nations Security Council resolution, which was agreed upon by the United Nations. With that, ladies and gentlemen, dear brothers and sisters, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.